The wind is screaming. It is not a metaphor. It is a physical force, a blade of air slicing across a frozen plain 20,000 years ago. Snow whips sideways. The sky is white, the ground is white, and between them stands a small band of humans, thin, exhausted, very much alive, and very close to death. A child slips. A woman lunges, catching him before the wind drags him into the drifts. Behind them, something moves in the storm. A shadow, large, four-legged, watching. This is the world of the last glacial maximum, around 26,000 to 19,000 years ago. Vast ice sheets, 2 miles thick in places, bury northern Europe and North America. Sea levels are lower by more than 100 meters. Entire coastlines are exposed. Forests retreat. Deserts expand. Temperatures plunge. And yet, this is also the moment when humans refuse to disappear. We often imagine the Ice Age as a static postcard, mammoths wandering beneath auroras, snow falling gently over quiet tundra. The reality was violent, unstable, deadly. Blizzards without warning, summers so short they felt like rumors, winters that could freeze exposed flesh in minutes. So here's the mystery that should keep you awake. How did a fragile species, with no claws, no thick fur, no hibernation instinct, survive this? Let's step into their world. Picture Eurasia at the height of the cold. Northern Europe is crushed beneath the Fennoscandian ice sheet. Britain is not an island. It is connected to the continent by a windswept landmass we now call Doggerland. Siberia stretches eastward, dry and bitter. The landscape is not uniformly icy. It is a mosaic. Steppe tundra grasslands, permafrost plains, pockets of forest clinging to river valleys. But temperatures? Brutal. Ice cores extracted from Greenland tell us that average temperatures in some regions were 10 to 15 degrees Celsius colder than today. In winter, parts of Siberia may have plunged below -40 degrees. This is not survivable without preparation, without planning, without intelligence. And yet, archaeological sites across this frozen world tell a different story from extinction. In Ukraine, at Measure-Reach, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary: circular dwellings built from mammoth bones, real architecture, carefully arranged tusks and skulls forming walls, hearths at the center, evidence of long-term habitation dated to around 15,000 years ago. Think about that for a second. These were not desperate animals hiding in caves. These were engineers of survival. They were shaping the Ice Age to fit them. Go further west to France. In caves like Lascaux, paintings burst across limestone walls, bison, horses, deer, rendered with astonishing skill around 17,000 years ago. These people were not just surviving, they were observing, remembering, imagining. And if you move east into Siberia, sites such as Yana RHS, above the Arctic Circle and dated to about 32,000 years ago, reveal human occupation in environments colder than anything most of us have experienced. Stone tools, animal bones, evidence of structured camps. 32,000 years ago, in the Arctic. Let that sink in. The Ice Age was not a single moment of crisis. It was a long war of attrition. Climate oscillated, ice advanced, retreated, advanced again. Entire regions became inhabitable, then reopened. Human groups had to adapt repeatedly, quickly, or vanish. This is where the drama intensifies, because humans were not alone out there. Woolly mammoths roamed the steppe. Woolly rhinoceroses with massive horns cut through snow. Cave lions stalked herds. Dire wolves, giant bears. The megafauna of the Pleistocene were not passive scenery. They were competition, threat, opportunity. Imagine that storm again. The shadow behind that human band might be a wolf pack trailing them, waiting for weakness, or a cave lion testing the wind. There were no walls, no locked doors, only open land and instinct. So how did they endure? Evidence suggests cooperation at a scale never before seen. Ice Age survival demanded social bonds, shared knowledge, intergenerational memory. How to find shelter in a blizzard, how to track migrating herds across hundreds of kilometers, how to ration dried meat through a long winter. The Ice Age may have sharpened something uniquely human, the ability to plan beyond the immediate horizon. We see this in tool technology. Blade-based stone tools become more refined during the Upper Paleolithic. Needles made from bone, some discovered in Siberia and dated to over 30,000 years ago, suggest tailored clothing, not crude hides thrown over shoulders, but stitched garments designed to trap heat. That changes everything. Clothing is not just comfort, it is survival in -30 degrees. It is the difference between frostbite and function, between migration and immobility. And fire, controlled, maintained, transported, became a portable sun. Hearths discovered across Ice Age sites reveal repeated occupation, ash layers, charcoal remains, burned bones. Fire was warmth, protection from predators, a place to cook and make tools, but it was also psychological. In a world of endless white and black sky, fire meant hope. Now here's where the tension deepens. Around 40,000 years ago, another human species still walked parts of Europe and Western Asia, the Neanderthals. They too had endured cold climates for hundreds of thousands of years. They were powerful, adapted, intelligent. And yet, by around 40,000 to 30,000 years ago, they disappear. Modern humans remain. Why? Was it climate instability, competition for resources, disease, interbreeding? The debate continues. Genetic evidence shows that non-African populations today carry Neanderthal DNA. There was contact, there was exchange, but there was also replacement. The Ice Age was not just a battle against cold, it was a crucible of species. By the height of the glacial maximum, Homo sapiens had spread across much of Eurasia, not huddled at the edges, but embedded within it. This is the shocking truth. The Ice Age did not nearly wipe us out at this stage. In many regions, humans were expanding, experimenting, thriving in ways that defy the brutal imagery of endless ice. But survival was never guaranteed. Every winter was a gamble. Every hunt carried risk. Every migration could end in starvation. And yet, generation after generation, they held on. When you picture that small group in the storm, child clutched tight, predators circling, wind roaring, you are looking at your ancestors. They did not conquer the Ice Age in a single heroic moment. They endured it, step by step, fire by fire, story by story. And that endurance, raw, relentless, human, is where our story truly begins. The cold doesn't kill you all at once. It seeps in, through seams in your clothing, through cracks in your shelter, through doubt. Picture a night on the Eurasian steppe. The wind has dropped, but the temperature has not. It is well below freezing. The sky is hard and clear, stars like shards of ice. Inside a low, circular structure, a fire glows at the center. Sparks rise, smoke curls toward an opening carefully left at the top. Outside, the world is lethal. Inside, it is barely survivable. This is the second great mystery of the Ice Age, not simply that humans endured it, but how they engineered warmth in a planet designed to strip it away. Let's start with fire. We know humans controlled fire long before the last glacial maximum. Evidence from sites in Africa and the Levant suggests habitual fire use at least 300,000 years ago, possibly earlier. But during the Ice Age, fire was no longer optional. It was infrastructure. Archaeological layers from Upper Paleolithic sites across Europe and Siberia show repeated hearth construction. Not random burn marks, not accidental blazes, structured fire pits. Sometimes lined with stones, sometimes rebuilt in the exact same spot over generations. That detail matters. Rebuilding a hearth in the same location suggests continuity, planning, memory tied to place. A hearth becomes the heart of a dwelling, a fixed point in a shifting climate. But fire alone is not enough when temperatures plunge below -30 degrees. You need insulation. This is where the evidence becomes astonishing. At sites like Mezerich in modern-day Ukraine, dated to roughly 15,000 years ago, researchers uncovered dwellings constructed from mammoth bones, skulls, tusks, long limb bones arranged in circular patterns up to 5 meters in diameter. These were not random piles, they were deliberate architectural forms. Imagine hauling massive mammoth skulls, each weighing over 100 kilograms, into position. Imagine stacking tusks as structural supports, then covering the frame with hides, packing earth and snow around the base to seal gaps. That is not desperation, that is design. Further east in Siberia, at sites like Malta and Yana HRS, we find evidence of semi-subterranean structures, homes dug partially into the ground to reduce wind exposure and conserve heat. Earth is an insulator. Even frozen earth buffers temperature better than open air. Think about what that implies. These people understood thermodynamics intuitively. Heat rises, wind strips warmth, ground stabilizes temperature, so they built low, rounded, efficient. And then there is clothing. For decades, clothing left little trace in the archaeological record because organic materials decay, but bone needles tell the story. In Siberian sites dated to more than 30,000 years ago, finely crafted needles with drilled eyes have been recovered. Not crude owls, true needles. A needle with an eye means stitching, tight seams, tailored garments. Loose animal skins draped over shoulders won't stop Arctic wind, but stitched layers, fur turned inward for insulation, outer hides treated to repel moisture, can. Experimental archaeology supports this. Researchers who recreated Ice Age-style clothing with reindeer and fox pelts found that layered, sewn garments dramatically reduce heat loss. Add boots lined with fur, add mittens, add hoods trimmed with thicker hair around the face. Suddenly, -20 becomes survivable. Here's where I want you to pause. We often talk about primitive humans, but sewing fitted cold-weather clothing from animal hides, using stone tools and bone needles in an environment where mistakes mean frostbite, that is not primitive. That is mastery under pressure. And it gets even more impressive. Fuel was not always abundant. In treeless steppe tundra environments, wood could be scarce. So what did humans burn? Bone. Archaeological evidence shows that mammoth bones and other large animal remains were used as fuel. Fat-rich bones can burn surprisingly well when dried. In some sites, hearths contain large quantities of burned bone fragments, indicating systematic use. Imagine the calculation. You hunt a mammoth, you eat the meat, you use the hide for shelter, the sinew for thread, the tusk for tools, and the bones for fuel. Total resource integration, nothing wasted. Now let's talk about mobility. The Ice Age was unstable. Glaciers advanced, rivers shifted, herds migrated seasonally. Humans had to follow food. That meant carrying technology with them. Portable toolkits become more refined during the Upper Paleolithic. Blade technology allows multiple sharp edges from a single core. Burins for carving bone, scrapers for hide preparation, projectile points for hunting. These are not random innovations, they form systems. A blade makes clean cuts in hide, a scraper removes fat, a needle stitches tight seams. Tight seams trap heat, heat preserves life. Layer by layer, tool by tool, survival becomes sustainable. And here's the emotional core of this mystery. Imagine a mother sewing by firelight, her child asleep beside her. Outside, the wind rises. She pulls sinew thread through fur, tightening a seam. not because it is decorative, but because a gap the size of a fingertip could let in cold that kills. That act, careful, repetitive, deliberate, is as heroic as any hunt. Because survival in the Ice Age was not just about dramatic confrontations with megafauna, it was about daily discipline, maintenance, repair, knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next. There's another piece of evidence that fascinates me: storage. Some Upper Paleolithic sites suggest organized areas for food processing and possibly short-term storage. In cold climates, frozen ground becomes a natural freezer. Meat can be preserved for extended periods if protected from scavengers. That changes the survival equation. Instead of living meal to meal, humans could plan weeks ahead. That reduces risk, it stabilizes groups, it allows for social complexity. And social complexity might be the most powerful insulation of all. Ice Age sites reveal long-distance trade in materials like obsidian and marine shells. Objects traveled hundreds of kilometers. That implies networks, alliances, exchange systems. In a volatile climate, having allies matters. If one region suffers crop failure, or rather herd collapse, another may not. Shared knowledge about migration routes, safe valleys, or reliable water sources could mean the difference between extinction and endurance. So when we ask, how did humans survive the Ice Age, the answer is not a single invention. It's a web. Fire, architecture, clothing, toolkits, social bonds, planning, adaptability. And underlying it all, imagination. The ability to look at a mammoth and see not just danger, but shelter, fuel, clothing, and tools. To look at frozen earth and see insulation. To look at darkness and build a hearth. The cold seeped in, yes, but humans built systems that pushed it back. And in doing so, they began to transform the Ice Age into an executioner, into an arena. Harsh, unforgiving, but conquerable. The ground trembles. Not from thunder, not from an earthquake, from hooves. A herd of mammoths, dozens of them, move across the frozen steppe, massive shoulders, curved tusks glinting in pale sunlight. Each one weighs up to 6 tons. Their breath rises in thick clouds. Calves huddle close to their mothers. Adults form a defensive ring when they sense danger. And somewhere in the tall, dry grasses, humans are watching. This is the third great mystery of the Ice Age. How did small bands of physically vulnerable humans hunt the giants of their world? Let's be honest. On paper, this should have been impossible. A woolly mammoth could crush a human with a single misstep. A woolly rhinoceros, armed with a 2-foot horn, could charge at terrifying speed. Cave bison weighed over a ton. Even a wounded reindeer could kill with a kick. Humans had no claws, no natural armor, no fangs. What they had was coordination. Archaeological sites across Eurasia reveal clear patterns of megafaunal hunting. In places like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, dating to around 30,000 years ago, mammoth bones appear in large concentrations, suggesting repeated, organized kills. At Kraków Spodzista in Poland, mammoth remains number in the hundreds, likely the result of coordinated hunts over time. These were not random scavenging events. Cut marks on bones, consistent with stone tool use, show systematic butchering. Long bones split to extract marrow, skulls opened for brain tissue, tusks removed for carving. The evidence is methodical. But how? One theory suggests landscape engineering. During colder periods, river valleys and natural bottlenecks may have been used to funnel herds into constrained spaces. Humans could drive animals towards cliffs, marshes, or soft ground where large bodies became liabilities. Picture it. A line of hunters spreads wide across the steppe, torches in hand, shouts carried by wind. They do not attack directly, they steer, they pressure, slowly tightening a corridor that leads to a ravine or unstable terrain. A mammoth slips. Panic ripples through the herd, chaos, noise, dust and snow explode into the air. Then, the spears come. Stone-tipped projectiles, likely thrown with the aid of spear throwers known as atlatls in later periods, could penetrate thick hide if aimed well. Multiple hunters, multiple strikes. Persistence. This is not brute strength. It is strategy under lethal stakes. Now I want you to consider the emotional dimension. Imagine standing 20 meters from a wounded mammoth. It is screaming. It is bleeding. It is furious. The ground shakes as it turns towards you. Your survival depends on your allies holding their nerve. Fear would have been overwhelming. But fear, when shared and disciplined, becomes power. There is also evidence that not all megafauna hunting relied on direct confrontation. Seasonal vulnerability mattered. During migrations, animals follow predictable routes. In winter, weakened individuals lag behind herds. Ice conditions could trap heavy animals near water sources. Humans observed patterns. They learned the rhythms of migration and reproduction. They timed their hunts. This observational intelligence may explain something even more controversial: the role humans played in megafaunal extinction. Between roughly 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, many large Ice Age species disappear. Mammoths, giant ground sloths in the Americas, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions. The debate remains intense. Was climate change the primary driver? Rapid warming at the end of the Ice Age certainly disrupted habitats, but the timing often aligns suspiciously with human expansion into new territories. In Australia, megafauna vanished shortly after human arrival around 50,000 years ago. In the Americas, many large species disappear within a few thousand years of human settlement around 13 to 15,000 years ago. Correlation does not automatically mean causation. But here's the uncomfortable question: did human hunting, even if small scale, tip already stressed ecosystems over the edge? Some researchers propose the overkill hypothesis, that highly efficient human hunters rapidly reduced populations of slow-reproducing megafauna. Others argue climate instability weakened species first, and humans merely accelerated decline. The truth may lie in combination. What matters for our story is this: humans were not passive participants in the Ice Age. They were ecological forces. And hunting was not just about calories, it shaped social structure. A successful mammoth hunt could feed dozens of people for weeks. It required planning, leadership, trust, post-hunt cooperation for butchering and distribution. Such events likely reinforced bonds, status hierarchies, and shared identity. We also see ritual emerging alongside hunting. In some sites, mammoth skulls appear arranged in patterns. In others, carved figurines, like the famous Venus of Dolní Věstonice, are found in proximity to hearths and animal remains. Whether symbolic, spiritual, or social, these artifacts suggest that hunting was more than economic. It was woven into belief. Now imagine the moment after the hunt. The mammoth lies still. Steam rises from its body in freezing air. Hunters approach cautiously. There is relief, exhaustion, gratitude, perhaps reverence. Children watch as adults begin the careful work of cutting hide, separating meat, removing tusks. Nothing wasted. Every part transformed into survival. This transformation of danger into sustenance is at the heart of human Ice Age resilience. And yet, hunting giants came with risk. Injuries were common. Skeletal remains from Upper Paleolithic humans show signs of trauma, fractures consistent with high-impact accidents, a misjudged charge, a fall during pursuit. A broken limb in winter could mean death. Which brings us back to cooperation. A wounded hunter could not survive alone. The fact that some individuals with healed severe injuries lived for years suggests communal care. Others carried them, fed them, protected them. Hunting megafauna was not simply about courage. It demanded a society capable of absorbing risk. So when we ask how humans conquered the Ice Age, we cannot ignore this paradox. They hunted the largest animals on Earth with stone tools. They altered ecosystems. They faced creatures that could annihilate them in seconds. And they did it together. The trembling ground beneath mammoth hooves was not just a threat. It was an opportunity. And humans, as fragile as they were, chose to step forward into that trembling world again and again, until the giants themselves began to fade from the ice-bound stage. The ice does not just block your path, it tempts you. Imagine standing on a ridge overlooking a vast, wind-swept plain. No cities, no borders, just open land stretching farther than the eye can see. To your right, glaciers tower like frozen mountains. To your left, a corridor of exposed earth leads into the unknown. And you decide to walk. This is the fourth great mystery of the Ice Age. How did humans cross continents wrapped in ice, and why did they keep going? Let's begin in northeastern Asia around 25,000 to 20,000 years ago. Sea levels are dramatically lower because so much water is locked in glaciers. The Bering Strait, which today separates Siberia from Alaska by about 85 kilometers of ocean, does not exist as open water. Instead, there is Beringia, a massive land bridge over 1,000 kilometers wide in places, connecting Asia and North America. Not a narrow crossing, a vast subcontinent of grasslands, rivers, and cold steppe, rich in game, harsh but livable. This changes everything. Humans living in Siberia, already adapted to Arctic conditions, do not need boats to cross into the Americas. They can walk. But here's the tension. When did they do it? For decades, the dominant theory held that humans entered the Americas around 13,000 years ago via an ice-free corridor that opened between the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets in North America. This corridor would have allowed migration southward into the continent's interior. The Clovis culture, known for distinctive fluted spear points, became the supposed signature of the first Americans. Clean, simple, linear. Except the evidence started cracking. Sites like Montevideo in Chile, dated to around 14,500 years ago, suggest humans were already deep in South America before the corridor was fully viable. Even more controversially, sites like Bluefish Caves in Yukon hint at possible human presence in Beringia as early as 24,000 years ago. That means humans may have arrived in Beringia during the last glacial maximum and waited. This is known as the Beringian standstill hypothesis. Picture it. A population moves into Beringia during colder periods. Glaciers block their path south. They remain there for thousands of years, isolated, adapting, hunting, living in a frozen refuge between continents. Genetic studies of indigenous American populations suggest this possibility. Mitochondrial DNA patterns suggest a period of isolation before rapid expansion southward. Now feel the weight of that moment. You are in Beringia. The world behind you is vast Siberia. The world ahead is a continent no human has ever mapped. Ice walls stand in your way. You wait. You adapt. You survive. Then, as the climate shifts and glaciers retreat around 16,000 to 14,000 years ago, pathways open, perhaps along the Pacific coast first, possibly by boat or shoreline travel. And suddenly, migration accelerates. Within a few thousand years, humans reach the southern tip of South America. That speed is staggering. From Alaska to Patagonia in perhaps 2,000 years, across deserts, mountains, forests, rivers. That is not wandering. That is determined expansion. Now let's widen the lens. The Americas are not the only migration story of the Ice Age. Humans also pushed into some of the coldest regions of Eurasia, including the Arctic Circle. Sites in Siberia demonstrate human presence far north of 60 degrees latitude tens of thousands of years ago. These were not temporary incursions, they were sustained occupations. And further south, humans crossed into Sahul, the prehistoric landmass connecting Australia and New Guinea, by at least 50,000 years ago. Even during lower sea levels, this journey required open water crossings, boats, planning, risk. So the Ice Age did not cage humanity, it mobilized it. Here's the emotional heartbeat of this section. Imagine standing at the edge of Beringia. Snow crunches beneath your boots. A child clutches your hand. The horizon is endless. No map, no guarantee of food beyond the next valley, no certainty that warmer lands lie ahead. Why move? Because staying still in a volatile climate can be just as dangerous as venturing outward. Glaciers reshape rivers. Herd routes change. Competition grows. A successful group may expand simply because they can. Curiosity is not a luxury. It becomes a survival trait. And the archaeological record supports this boldness. Tools found across early American sites show continuity with Siberian technologies: blade cores, bifacial points, bone tools. Cultural knowledge traveled with people. These migrants were not isolated bands stumbling blindly. They carried traditions, techniques, stories. As they spread across the Americas, they encountered new ecosystems: giant ground sloths in South America, mastodons in North America, saber-toothed cats, entirely new climates, from Arctic tundra to tropical forests. And yet, within a geological blink of an eye, humans adapted to all of it. That adaptability is the true conquest, not dominance through brute force, but flexibility. The Ice Age created barriers, glaciers, frozen seas, permafrost plains. But it also created corridors, exposed land bridges, coastal routes, grassland highways across Eurasia. Humans read those corridors, and they moved. Every footprint in ancient Beringian soil, every stone tool dropped along a Pacific shoreline, every hearth lit in a newly settled valley is evidence of a species unwilling to be confined. When we ask how humans conquered the Ice Age, this is a crucial answer. They refused to see ice as a wall. They saw it as a map waiting to be traced. The ice begins to melt. Not in a dramatic avalanche, not in a single thunderous collapse. It melts in silence. Glaciers that once stretched for thousands of kilometers start to retreat. Rivers swell with meltwater. Coastlines shift. Valleys flood. What was white becomes green. What was frozen becomes unstable. And with that change comes the final mystery of the Ice Age. How did humans survive not just the cold, but its end? Because here's the truth. Warming can be just as dangerous as freezing. Around 19,000 years ago, global temperatures began to rise. The great ice sheets slowly thinned. By about 11,700 years ago, the Pleistocene epoch gave way to the Holocene, the relatively warm period we still live in today. But this transition was anything but smooth. There were sudden reversals. One of the most dramatic was the Younger Dryas, beginning around 12,900 years ago. After a period of warming, temperatures in parts of the northern hemisphere abruptly plunged back toward near-glacial conditions. It lasted roughly 1,200 years. Imagine the psychological shock. You've begun to adapt to warmer seasons. Vegetation expands. Herd patterns shift. Rivers carve new channels. And then, cold returns. Crops fail where early cultivation may have begun. Animal migrations alter again. Landscapes you thought you understood become unpredictable. Ice Age survival had always required flexibility. Now that flexibility was tested at unprecedented speed. Let's talk about megafauna. As the climate warmed, grasslands shrank. Forests expanded. The open steppe tundra ecosystems that supported mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses fragmented. Combined with sustained human hunting pressure, many large species vanished between 15,000 and 10,000 years ago. The disappearance of mammoths was not just ecological, it was cultural. For tens of thousands of years, mammoths had provided meat, shelter materials, fuel, tools, even artistic inspiration. Their bones built homes, their tusks carved figurines, their hides insulated families through Arctic winters. And then, they were gone. Humans had to pivot. In many regions, we see a shift towards smaller game, deer, rabbits, fish. Hunting strategies change. Tools diversify. Microliths, tiny stone bladelets, appear in various parts of Eurasia. These could be mounted onto shafts to create composite tools adaptable for different prey. This is not decline, it is innovation under pressure. As forests spread, plant resources become more abundant in some areas. Seeds, nuts, tubers, foods that once played a secondary role gain importance. Grinding stones appear in archaeological sites. Evidence of plant processing increases. In the Levant, the Natufian culture, dating to around 15,000 to 11,500 years ago, provides one of the most fascinating glimpses of this transition. Semi-sedentary communities begin forming. Stone structures become more permanent. There is evidence of intensive wild grain harvesting. This is the edge of something revolutionary. Agriculture. Not fully realized yet, but emerging from the turbulence of climate instability. Here's the emotional turning point. For tens of thousands of years, humanity mastered movement. Follow the herds, track the seasons, build portable shelters, adapt quickly. Now, in certain regions, some groups begin to stay. Staying is risky. If climate shifts again, if rainfall patterns change, if local resources fail, sedentary life becomes vulnerable. And yet, people experiment. The younger Dryas cold snap may have accelerated this experimentation. As wild grain yields fluctuated, cultivating and protecting specific plant species could stabilize food supply. Controlled landscapes replace purely wild ones. Climate pressure becomes creative force. But this transition was not universal or immediate. Many groups continued as mobile hunter-gatherers for thousands of years. Human adaptation was plural, not singular. Meanwhile, sea levels rise, over 120 meters between the last glacial maximum and the mid-Holocene. Vast coastal plains disappear beneath water. Doggerland, once connecting Britain to Europe, is submerged. Beringia vanishes under the Bering Strait. Entire human habitats are erased. We do not know how many settlements now lie beneath oceans, how many stories are lost, how many migrations were triggered by encroaching seas. This is perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Ice Age's end. Conquest does not mean control. Humans did not stop the ice. They did not command the climate. They endured its fury and then endured its retreat. Through every oscillation, glacial advance, sudden warming, abrupt cold reversals, they adjusted. The conquest was internal. Adaptability over rigidity. Cooperation over isolation. Innovation over despair. By 10,000 years ago, humans occupy every continent except Antarctica. From the Arctic tundra to equatorial forests, from the Andean highlands to coastal estuaries. The Ice Age had tried to confine them within frozen corridors. Instead, it forged a global species. And here is the deeper revelation. The Ice Age did not simply test humanity, it shaped humanity. Our capacity for long-term planning, for symbolic thought, for wide social networks, for technological creativity, all of these traits were sharpened in that crucible of cold and change. When glaciers retreated, humans did not return to some earlier simplicity.
They carried forward the lessons of ice. Fire in hostile environments. Architecture built from what is available. Hunting strategies that rely on cooperation. Migration guided by memory and courage. Adaptation to sudden climate swings. Today, when we speak of climate change, of rising seas and shifting ecosystems, we are not confronting an entirely new challenge. We are confronting a familiar one, at a different scale. Our ancestors faced ice walls and melting horizons with stone tools and stitched hides. They had no satellites, no written records, no engines, but they had something fundamental: the willingness to adapt. The Ice Age ended. The glaciers retreated. The mammoths faded into memory. Humans remained. And in remaining, they transformed a frozen world into the foundation of civilization.